Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Hot 103 Jamz. I will vote in 2020 virtual forum 2, the Black Male Voting Bloc. I am your host, Brian B Shynin, co-host of the Morning Grind with Shay Shyne. And this year has been a lot, a crucial election year added on to that. And also 2020 marks the 100-year anniversary of women's suffrage. Also marks 150 years since the 15th Amendment, which won the right for Black men to vote. Now, while Black men have shared some of the same concerns of Black women at the ballot box, it's not exactly the same. And that's why we're here this evening with an esteemed panel. First, I want to introduce Myron Fears, Operations Manager here at the Carter Broadcast Group, Jazz Brewer, owner of 64111 Studio, Jermaine Reed, former KC Councilman and MCC Board of Trustees. We also have Mondale Robinson from the Black Male Voter Project. And also I have a couple of co-moderators and panelists. Wouldn't be nothing without Black women. Julie Jones from Hot 103 Jamz and Michelle Watley from Shirley's Kitchen Cabinet. Now, first I want to throw it to Jazz from 64111 Studios. I really wanted to know, because you have a lot of posts on your Facebook page, and I wanted to know from you exactly what are the issues that are important to you as a Black man?
Man, I have a plethora of issues. I want to start with police brutality. That's the number one issue right now. People are being killed and slaughtered, and they're not really being given a fair shot. You know what I'm saying? They're not being treated fairly. I've seen a lot of instances where if it was a white person or something in the same situation, these people are getting off, and some of these people are doing heinous things, and they're still in a situation where they walk away unscathed. And it's just not fair that unarmed people are being murdered. You know what I'm saying? And it's just really devastating. And we've been seeing this for so long that it's almost like we're becoming numb to it. You know what I mean? And with COVID slowing the world down just enough for people to actually see what's going on, it's giving people from other races a chance to actually recognize that this is an issue. You know what I mean? So police reform is definitely top on my list. And student loans, because I have a lot of them. So.
Well, so do we all. Jermaine, I really want to hear from your perspective on what are the issues that are important to you as being a Black man in this country.
Well, first of all, Brian, let me say thank you to you and the Carter Broadcast Group for this very important conversation. You all, of course, are always on the front lines of making sure that our voices are heard. And this conversation tonight is another example of just that. As it relates to the issues that are important to me, I echo Jazz's comments of police brutality. Of course, as we are hearing across these United States that Black Lives Matter, it's not just the same. It is something that is the reality for so many Black, brown, and Latino men and women in this entire country, and importantly here in Kansas City. As it relates to economic development, those issues are always at the forefront. We in our communities live in food deserts, unfortunately. We live in health deserts, unfortunately. And these issues are things that we have to address in our community. And we need to make sure that we're going to the polls to vote not only for the presidential candidates, but also up and down the ticket. Those who are running for state offices, those who are running for local offices, those who are running for even just local county elections or whatever it may be in townships throughout this entire city. We have to make sure that our issues are at the forefront of those. We got to make sure that there's an opportunity agenda that is at the table. It's part of the reason why I signed on so many topics that are addressing us around this entire country and ensuring that we had a woman on the actual ticket for the presidency of the United States of America, because women should be able to help us in leading a lot of these issues that are at the forefront. And so I'm sure as the night goes on, I know we have an hour, but we may go on a little longer. We'll be able to touch on some of those and a lot more issues that are in front of us.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. 16% of Black men voted for Donald Trump in 2016, and they hope to leverage more of the Black male vote this election. I want to throw it to Mondale Robinson. What is your response to that and those numbers?
So, straight up, my answer is so, and the reason it's so is because it's ahistorical for us to be talking about the 16% of Black men, or 16%, so they say. We should say 16% of registered Black men voters, because majority of Black men don't and will never vote for a Republican, especially when you consider a lot of us aren't even registered to vote. But beyond that, if we look at history since Black people have been voting for this type of Republicans, these new Republicans, since the shift when Fannie Lou Hamer got sick and tired of being sick and tired. Donald Trump did worse than most Republican nominees for president, except for Mitt Romney and John McCain. So it's not a big deal in the sense, if you think about, no men in this country vote more together than Black men. Not white men, not Asians, not Latinos. This is a narrative that white folk need to create so they can blame us for their deficit. The tragedy is the number of white women voted for Donald Trump. The number of poor white men that voted for Donald Trump. That's the true tragedy. Talking about Black men in the form of 16%, it makes no sense. If it was a business model and politics is a business, it's a bad way to think about how we target Black men, meaning that we're only going to target the 16% that are Republican. Black men, like every other demographic in this country, hold the right and ability and agency to be conservative if they want to be, even if it's anti our community to do so. I think it's tragic that we, the national media want us to focus on that 16% or so that voted for Donald Trump. I am excited about the fact that, the work that we're doing at Black Male Voters Project is showing me that brothers when engaged like everybody else, vote just like everybody else. Yeah, we are currently 10% in the last presidential election behind our female counterparts, our women counterpart, but that's not a critique of Black men. Even the low turnout of Black men is not a critique of us. It's a critique of how this country play politics, especially since we know voting is a habit that's formed by resources spent on it. And since no one is prioritizing Black men and their issues, then we can't expect Black men to come out in polls in droves when 70% of our budgets, talking about political campaigns, are trying to convince white women, conservative white women, to vote for Democrats. That's a failed policy. It's a failed strategy, and it just reeks of white supremacy.
Thank you for that, Mondale. We have a historian on the panel. I don't know if you know this, but Myron Fears, I know you have a lot of thoughts about what's going on in this political landscape we're in. Really wanted to know your thoughts on what Mondale just said and those numbers. Myron, you there?
You muted, brother.
Oh, there you go. My bad. In terms of the historic perspective of, where we are right now in terms of the Trumpism, you have to look at the history of how the shifts of the parties happened after 1964, after the Civil Rights Act, where, if you think of it, the Democratic Party used to be very what we see right now, what the Republican Party is. And Barry Goldwater changed that, the Republican Party, with the Southern strategy that led in 1968 to Nixon with his Southern strategy policy, which is basically to play on race. And so the thing is right now is that race is one of the biggest issues that you see what Trump is doing right now in the Republican Party, and it's playing on people's fears. I agree with Mr. Mondale Robinson that, you're going after audience of conservative women, and we know that women is the key to any political victory. Usually the margin is around, and Mondale, you can quote me, if they get around 53 to 57% of women voters, that you're going to win an election. So I think that in terms of African-American men, I think it's, you know, as an African-American male, I've always voted. I've always looked at it from a perspective of that people who have died for this right to vote. You know, you have to me personally, I get involved in it because I want to see if my vote makes a difference. So I think that we can't give up. That's not a solution, but we have to make our voices be heard.
Absolutely. One thing I really wanted to talk to you all about is the stigma of voting within our community. And oftentimes I get in conversations, personal conversations with some friends who aren't all the way sold that our votes actually count. Myron, I really wanted to throw this question to you. What is with the stigma in our communities, and how can we break the curse?
I think lack of hope has been one of the issues. You know, we were discussing that off the meeting. A lot of people just feel that there's no hope. But I think that in terms of elections, that it's, you know, and Jermaine can echo this, you know, it takes more than just a national election, but you have to make a difference on your local and your state level and your national levels. So it does pay off when you're involved. If you're not involved, then you're allowing somebody else to lead your destination. So you're not to try and not to get involved and not to get involved in the process. That to me is nonsense. And I just believe that, you know, it has to happen on all levels. If we look at what's happening right now, not only in the White House situation, but things could change in terms of the Senate race. We got hot Senate races in Colorado, Iowa, Arizona, Montana, the Carolinas, Pennsylvania, Maine. Those all can be a difference. You look at what has happened under this administration in the last 3 years in terms of voting rights, civil rights, things that they just kick down the street and don't want to, you know, don't want to do the right thing. That could be impactful if you get the wrong people in the Supreme Court. If your Senate is not going to be down with, and we saw it with Obama, you know, got blocked like crazy. So it's very important. Every level is important. You know, this election is super important because, you know, we're just seeing the beginning of the worst right now.
Jermaine, I really wanted to throw this question to you as well about the stigma of not voting within our communities, because you yourself have been on a couple of campaign trails.
Yeah, you know, Myron touched on a lot of very important points. And as someone who has served in public office, as you've referenced, I know firsthand of many of those concerns that people have as it relates to the people at the table don't represent me. One of the reasons why I got involved in public service is because I realized that if I was not at the table, I might be on the menu. And I wanted to be at the table of decision-making to ensure that my voice and the voice of those around me in my community were actually at the table, helping set the agenda for what was happening in our local community. And so while we were able to do that here on the local level on the city council over the past decade in which I served, I know that that is important as we look forward in the future. You know, when you look at the statistics to some of the points that Myron has brought up, it basically tells you that Democrats have been losing support among African-American males since Barack Obama departed the White House. If you look at the numbers from Texas to Nevada to Georgia to here in Missouri, so forth and so on, the percentages are staggering. And I believe that Republicans and also Democrats, they understand that the mere fact that we're able to pick up some of those actual votes, because a lot of Democrats and those of us as African Americans, unfortunately, don't feel as their voices are actually heard, and that people take their votes for granted. We got to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to make sure that we're targeting, that our messages are on point, and that everything that we stand for, that our voices are actually heard at the tables of decision making. And that's what I think that unfortunately is lost as it relates to so many people in our community. That they feel like they look at their communities and they turn around and they say, well, nothing has really changed since the election of Barack Obama. Nothing has changed, or things that even gotten worse under Donald Trump. So why should I vote? Because I'm busy. And the reality of it is that as we said, is that these elections really do matter. And the people who represent our needs and concerns at the very tables of decision making, from the White House to the State House to our city governments and city halls around this entire country, they really do matter.
Brian, can I get in on this question?
Absolutely, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
So
Please.
So I just in defense of Black men, we talked about the stigma of Black men not voting, and the tragedy is this is the language. This language is how the Democratic Party escaped this responsibility to turn out its base. It is not the problem of Black men that we don't vote. It is the problem of the consultant class who continues to chase a white vote, especially in national elections, which is a demographic they've not won in 40 plus years. Yet and still, we still start our election season every 4 years in Iowa, which will never be a Democratic stronghold. Why haven't we been spending $67 million every 4 years in Mississippi, where 37% of the electorate is Black? Why are we not in South Carolina as a first state? Why are we not in Georgia as a first state? This is because the consultant class of the Democratic Party is majority white, and they speak language that's comfortable to white folk. Let's talk about something real quick. Black men don't vote because if you think about what Maslow hierarchy of needs tells us, a person who is not comfortable in his basic needs, in his physiological needs, can't think about things that are self-actualization. Meaning, if I don't have clean water, air, comfort like housing, if I'm insecure in job, if I'm insecure in healthcare, I can't consider something that seems like buying art or taking vacation, or in this case, voting. Voting to Black men is a hobby that they don't have time to play because we're struggling with real life issues on a daily basis. And until Black folks Black men specifically, see voting as a tool that can change some of those hurts that we're suffering from, our basic needs or our physiological needs, we'll never vote in the masses. And that's not a critique of us. Again, we have, after white men, Black men were supposedly the second people in this country enfranchised, right? The 15th Amendment supposedly gave us the right to vote. But what we know was the 15th Amendment was the beginning of voter suppression that we still are suffering from today. So not only are we neglected as it pertains to policies, and Black men aren't wrong when they say it's not that they feel like the political space doesn't do anything for them. It's a true fact. Everything, if you look at social markers, Black men make up the lowest rung on all of those social markers. More likely to be put in special needs, even though we don't need it. More likely to be suspended or expelled from school. Least likely to have health care, shortest lifespan in this country. And also we're over sentenced, overrepresented in unemployment and underemployment. So when you think about all of these as political issues, Black men aren't wrong when they say that no one is addressing their problems. These are the problems that are affecting them. So until someone does behavior psychology to change the mindset of Black men as it pertains to how politics work for them and make them believe it, and then show proof after the election is over, meaning policies change so that our lives are better, then they have every right to say that nothing is changing in their lives. So this is what we do at Black Male Voters Project. We don't talk about candidates. We definitely don't talk about national politics because the Electoral College is too confusing to try to teach someone in 60 days. That's a failure of our education system. So we don't do that. We do is we find out what issues are most important to Black men, and we make Black men issue voters, and it works. We've seen it work time and time again, and until everybody from the top of the ticket to the bottom of the ticket are centering those issues, you can't expect this demographic, Black men, to show up. And and people will continue to say, I see this year they're calling us the swing voter. That to me is the beginning to blame Black men for the problem. Black men aren't swing voters. We vote the same way every time we vote. We're not swing voters, and that's just a trick to make people believe that we have a scapegoat. That's about to happen, and that's Black men. So I push back just a little bit gently on the fact that people want to say it's something bad or wrong with Black men for not voting. I vote every election. I make sure my people vote every election. I have an organization that's about Black men voting, but I also tell the truth when I'm talking to Black men. Voting will not solve our problems. It is a tool in the chest that we must employ. However, we have to employ it smartly, meaning talking about Joe Biden or Donald Trump is not going to motivate Black men who already don't participate to participate. What will motivate them is if you make them understand that if you got a problem with the police culture in your city, that's a mayoral problem. Fire your mayor. Your mayor hires the police chief. Get rid of them, get rid of the police chief, get rid of that culture. If you got a problem with your cousin or you been over sentenced by a thirsty DA, that DA probably hasn't been challenged in most of their elections. Challenge that person. If you got a problem with the sheriff who has unlivable conditions in the county jail, get rid of that person. Those are spaces that we could tie to issues that are important to Black men and make that conversation so much, this conversation about my vote don't matter doesn't make sense in this context, because these are local elections and people know who voted for a sheriff or who didn't vote for a sheriff, and they also know who that sheriff is. And it's easier to have that conversation than talking about hundreds of million voters.
Hey, Mr. Robinson. So let me ask you this, man, and I'm down with what you just said, and you threw something out that was really, really strong in terms of the strategy. So we know that the Republican Party, they got the Southern strategy. So what you're saying is that we should have a urban strategy that basically we know that in terms of the Republican, that their strategy is protect white males at all costs. But in terms of the Democratic Party that is more diverse, that the strategy should go where the people who vote for that party. Is that what I'm hearing?
I mean, basically, it's exactly what I'm hearing. But what
Okay.
I'm really saying is the party does better when they reject this idea that you can talk to voters 4 or 5 times. If you think about traditional campaigns campaigns are designed for 2 things. The first thing is to maintain the status quo. The second thing is to reelect the incumbents. If you don't believe me, think about everybody that's running a traditional campaign and how often incumbents are reelected. You don't beat an incumbent running a traditional campaign. You have to do something that's out of the norm, right? So if we want to do something out of the norm, stop centering candidates and center community issues, center the needs of folk that are really suffering, and let that drive the conversation. So we know that the party has failed epically at turning out voters, not just Black voters, but voters in general. We generally have, if you're thinking about developed nation, we have a low performing election, even on presidential elections when it's 67, 70% of voters. That's low. So what we know is this method is only for a certain amount of vote. And I don't really think we don't even really need that many white folk to win elections. If I'm being honest, if we're talking about national elections, if you think about it, Barack Obama Barack Obama swept Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney got more white votes than Ronald Reagan did, and Ronald Reagan won 49 states. Think about that for a second. That's a demographic shift that the political consultants refuse to acknowledge in their tactics. All we need to do is center people, not party, not candidates, and we'll see victories all up and down the ballot. And it's true. If you look at the work we did in Georgia, excuse me, if you look at the work we did in Georgia, we have an aditory approach. Our campaign, we threw out traditional campaigning because it's too transactional, and Black men are not here for that. You can't scare Black men enough about Donald Trump, because if you ask them, every president, with the exception of Barack Obama, was racist, right? So just because he's orange isn't going to scare Black men to the polls. And Joe Biden doesn't have enough time to convince Black people or Black men that he's going to help them. This is not to say that Black men won't vote for Joe Biden. It's just he's not going to be the reason they go to the poll, but for those who are already going to go anyway. So what we do is we expand who we're talking to. We talk to the brothers who are street tribes, gang members, people who participated in the underground economy, drug dealers. And we also talk to brothers who have not voted in 4 or 5 of the last elections, because that's the majority of Black men in this country. And what we're seeing is when you center the needs of these brothers, they turn out. In Georgia, we saw 96,000 new voters in Black men, 96,000 in the primary that did not vote for Barack Obama. And any primary since then came out and vote this year. Think about that. 96,000 brothers who did not vote for Barack Obama in 2008. They didn't vote in 2010, 2012, 2014, 2016, 2018, but they showed up this year.
So basically, being Jesus, like Jesus worked beyond 4 walls. He went out to the streets.
Indeed.
I wanted to chime in.
Jazz, hold on. Before we move on, Jazz, I had to let this disclaimer out. The thoughts and views of this forum do not necessarily reflect Hot 103 Jamz or the Carter Broadcast Group. Jazz, quickly, go ahead. 60 seconds.
All right. Well, I've seen people come out in droves when marijuana was on the ballot. I'm just gonna keep it 100. So if people are interested in a certain issue, they'll come out and vote. The core issue, one of the core issues is that people just simply don't believe in the system. They've done a really effective job of keeping people disenchanted with the way things work. So people don't even decide to educate themselves. And then with social media, there's just a ton of misinformation. So what I do is I post up on social media to try to spark dialogue. Even if people are upset or pissed about it, like I just make sure that I post something to at least spark interest and give people enough, just give them some starting point, to go ahead and do some more research, you know what I mean? So, but I've seen people come out. I've seen social media go crazy. When we hit the ballot, they was out there and it got passed here and it's on its way to becoming recreational soon. And that was just one example of what people are interested in. And we just have to change the fact that people just don't have belief in the system. And it's systemic and there's just so many layers to it, but we just need to start attacking them one by one.
All right, Jazz, you mentioned misinformation, and that's a perfect segue to my next question. I'm gonna throw this to you exclusively. In this climate of disinformation, how do we encourage Black men to properly seek candidates' policies and platforms?
Okay, well, these guys, see, outside of social media, all of these candidates, these senators, all of these people that run, they have individual websites. They have phone numbers, they have emails. They discuss their platforms on these websites, and you can go out and actually find direct information directly from their campaign. And a lot of people choose not to do that. Okay, Facebook is here, they're providing information, so I just take that as law. Well, you have to go a step beyond that, and you have to actually go to these pages. And these guys are directly influenced by the decisions that are made and the thoughts and views that the people have. If you pay attention, if you make your voice heard, if you vote, and it's just people just decide not to do it, because they don't believe that it's real. And so you just have to take a step beyond social media and really get in contact with these people. These are physical people at physical locations. You can go talk to these people. We have union hall meetings, town hall meetings all the time. People don't show up. If you have an issue that you want to discuss, you can show up in person and literally voice what you want to say to these people. And people just choose not to do it. And it's available. So it's like, You gotta step out beyond Facebook. You got bots out there putting out false information. You got people from other countries that are putting out false information, and they come across and they appear, I mean, they look like you. They have a black avatar, you know what I mean? And you just can't tell who is who. So you gotta step beyond social media.
All right, we're going to move on to section 2 in our forum, and we want to involve our ladies, Julie Jones and Michelle. And Jermaine, I wanted to point this question to you, as you being a part of 100 Black men who wrote a letter demanding that Joe Biden pick a Black woman. Explain why you signed that letter.
Well, there are several reasons why I signed on to the letter, which included 100 African Americans across this entire country, encouraging Joe Biden to select an African American as his running mate. The reality of it is that we know that there still is a discomfort, unfortunately, among many as it relates to a woman on a ticket. We saw that discomfort while Hillary Clinton was running back in 2016. But we know that many women in our country, they're more than just moms. And even in today, here in Kansas City, where a lot of moms are not only been school teachers, been the person who's making sure that the home is actually working, but they also are chief executives. And that was one of the reasons why we urged very strongly that he pick an African-American as the top of his ticket. And as you know, there were a lot of qualified women that he had an opportunity to select from. And so when I got a call from one of my counterparts in Virginia asking if I would sign on, I readily signed on to lend my name in support. But we also know that there were over 700 women who also encouraged Joe Biden to pick an African-American woman. It is their time, and we need to be supportive and let our rhetoric match our commitment.
I want to throw it to Michelle Wally and get her thoughts on this letter and why Jermaine signed it.
I think it's important that we see the collectivism of the Black community when we think about and figure out ways to engage in advocacy and politics. As Jermaine mentioned, there was a letter from Black men standing up and advocating for and using their voice, making sure their voice is heard to ensure that Joe Biden pick a Black woman. Black women were on the other side doing the same thing. What we don't often hear, in the narrative we don't hear, is how the collective political engagement of Black people has led to the successes that the Democratic Party has had more recently in 2020 with Joe Biden getting over the hump in South Carolina. The narrative that Black men are not voting or that they're not engaged is another form of disenfranchisement. And what it does is it paints a picture that Black women are carrying the load when Black men vote at just as high of rates, just as close as Black women do. Black people as a community are the most engaged voting bloc in the United States. And so I think it was great to see Black men come to the table and make their voices heard alongside Black women for something we shouldn't have had to advocate for in the first place. There's no way Joe Biden is winning the Democratic primary without Black voters. And to make this demand and ask, and to have to write letters and advocate in the way that Black men and women leaders across this country had to, for someone who is highly qualified, that shouldn't even been something we had to do. But we had to, and we won't stop. We can't stop. Voting is only the first step to ensure that whoever is elected into office in November advocates for our issues and passes policies that impact Black people. And if they don't, we've got to be just as vigilant when they get in office to hold them accountable.
Julie, I know you're chomping at the bit. I need your 2 cents plus more.
Okay. And first of all, once again, we just want to say this conversation is not an endorsement of any candidate, any party, blah, blah, blah. That's our disclaimer. Now back into the topic at hand. One thing we need to talk about, we saw it in 2016 with Hillary Clinton, the misogyny, right? This time it took an even uglier twist because you have a Black woman, from people questioning whether or not Kamala Harris is really Black. Are people just saying throw a Black woman in just because? There was a lot of misogyny, and let's just be clear, misogyny noir, where it is also not only based on sex, but on race. So what I want to ask, and it got so ugly, even from women, I was like, wow. And while some of it is, we do know setups, we've talked about bots and, you know, like even propaganda from other countries, but how should Black men respond when they see these type of attacks on women candidates? We're not even just going to talk. Senator Harris is the most prominent candidate right now, but this could happen in the future. It could happen with local candidates. How should Black men stand in the gap for Black women when it comes to these type of attacks? Anybody can take that.
Mondale, go ahead and jump in.
Sure thing. Listen, I am brother to 7 sisters, the nephew to over 13 women, and I got a dope mom and had 2 dope grandmothers. So I mean, listen, some of the critiques I saw of the sister were ridiculous. Questioning her race, and then a ton of other stuff that we're used to, unfortunately, in this country when women are presented in forms of leadership outside of the kitchen or the home. So I think it's tragic that it's 2020 and we're dealing with you know, this like the attacks that happened to Senator Harris. Here's what's important. It is important for anyone calling themselves an ally to someone that's not them, someone that is that find themselves on the margin as Black women do. It is extremely critical that you're not waiting till it's popular to speak up against it. And it's not for solely Black women. It's also for us. These are our sisters, our mothers, our cousins, our partners, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we have an obligation to be whole. And if we are going to be whole, and if you are raising Black men issues, then that includes Black women as well. So we have to speak up loud and clear. Now, that is not to say that all critique of Senator Harris isn't valid. I'm talking about those invalid critiques that were based in nothing other than sexism and a lot of other isms that are destroying our community.
Very good. Jamz, I'm gonna ask you to weigh in because I know that you are a fighter against disinformation, memes, and all that. Then we're gonna come to Big Papa Myron Fears.
Okay, well, a lot of people online, well, Kamala Harris was a prosecutor. And so she got a lot of people locked up. She's a prosecutor. That's what she did.
That's her job.
A lot of people took that information and they amplified that to a point where by the time she got elected as VP, it just became a huge thing. So that, and a lot of people didn't know anything else about her. So it was like once they started looking at her research or start researching her, they like, okay, well, she's locked a bunch of Black people up. You know what I mean? And I actually questioned her as a pick initially myself.
Now, please share. Oh, Jamz, are you frozen?
Oh, you hear me?
Now we can, yeah.
Oh man. Okay. Well, no, I actually questioned his pick because when you consider the percentage that we make up demographically in America, I was like, I wonder how many white folk would actually vote for a Black woman as VP. She could potentially be president if something happens to Biden, and we all know that he's a pretty old guy. So I don't know. I just think everybody should give her a chance. She seems like a pretty strong woman, and from what I've seen, she seems very stable, and I think that she has the ability to tackle issues that any other candidate would not dare touch, especially regarding African Americans.
Go ahead, Fears, weigh in.
I just think it's flat out wrong. You know, it's when you start like Mr. Robinson said, that you're throwing these names out here that is not even associated to who she is, in terms as a person. It's just flat out wrong. So I think as a man, if anybody would step up and say that stuff too, and I want to say another word about my wife or my mother, I have to stand in and say this is wrong. And I think that, but it shows the ugly side of America too, that we have to go so low to be saying things like this, or we have leadership that when it comes to women in the press, and they look like you, Julie, and they look like you, Michelle, and they say bad things about it, and these women are super smart, and they wouldn't be in that position if they wasn't smart. So I think that, as Black men, we have to say that it's wrong. And also the silent folks who may not look like us, they have to say it's wrong too, because it's wrong. It's no need for it in politics. We need respect out here. And when you go that low, it's, it eats you up. But, we've been dealing with this stuff for as long as we've been in America. But we can't act a fool like these folks that's throwing it like, we just can't go that low, y'all. It doesn't make any sense. But we got to stand up for, Ms. Harris. Ms. Harris, she got picked. And, if that's our candidate, we need to be down with her. If it's not, you be down with you are. But you still need to say it's wrong.
Yeah, and that was another thing Mondale pointed out, a very good point. I think there's a difference between critiquing a record and attacks that just aren't warranted. And one thing that we have to do is always look at records in its entirety, because there is a lot of misinformation and people will pick parts they don't like. And you have to look at the source, which is why I never let people, don't be posting memes on my page out of context. We don't know where they come from. But Jermaine, it looks like you also wanted to weigh in on this as well.
Yeah, a couple of things that I would add to the conversation. And one is that as we just celebrated or commemorated more so the March on Washington, and also had a March on Kansas City just last week, it's not lost on me that there's so many people who work extremely hard for us to have the right to vote. Of course, we lost back in July one of the civil rights living legends, John Lewis, who, of course, marched across the bridge, shed his blood pretty much for us to have the right to vote. These things aren't cliche. These are things that actually happen for us to have that right to vote. But one of the things I think, as Myron Fears was talking, that really sticks out is that speech on Washington when Martin Luther King talked about, and I paraphrase, that we will be judged not by the color of the skin, but by the content, the color of our skin, but by the content of our character. And I think that as we have this conversation about a VP Black woman as the nominee, by the way, which only one person gets the opportunity to select in each party, which is the presidential nominee who selects that individual, which gives us the right to urge and suggest this is the reason why, because that one individual is the presidential nominee gets to select that individual. We have to judge this person by their character and by the things that they have done. And so, yes, we rightfully so look through information as it relates to their past. And in this case, of course, Kamala Harris, as a former prosecutor in California, she does have a long record, but a lot of that, unfortunately, has been taken out of context. But she is our VP nominee for the Democratic Party. Obviously, there are the Green Party, there are the Republican Party, there's those independents, and folks have choices. And so it's important that we look from that lens in ensuring that the person that we select, that is selected, is someone who represents our needs, our concerns for all of us, but not being judged by all these other things, but by the content of their character.
Can we stay here for a second? Because I feel like I need to say this, and because I heard Jazz say a couple of things that I know are sitting like uneasy with my soul. The brother was like, when he questioned the picking of Kamala Harris because will white people support? That's a real thing. However, it's also based in a false idea. We don't need white voters, not those white voters to win elections. Barack Obama won presidency twice without white voters for I mean, if you think about it, the sake of it, Barack Obama was reelected with only 39% of the white vote. It's how you build your coalition that's going to elect you. And then the second thing I want to talk about is we can't allow people to think that we're saying that critique of someone who as late as 2016 was saying, yes, I was proud to be California's top cop. That is enough in itself to make Black people ask questions, especially Black men who are the biggest victims of America's judicial system or broken judicial system, to say, hey, whoa, what's going on here? How do we have on one hand the author of the 94 crime bill and also someone who will not apologize for it, and then you add this to it? So we this is not to say that the other side is better. For actually, we know they're worse. Like it's not even a close race, but we still have to give space, especially if we're trying to bring people who are not nuanced into politics. If we're trying to bring new people into this process, to shut everybody down who critiques a police record, a district attorney and attorney general. I call them cops because they are. And also, Joe Biden, a crusty old white man who has been doing politics for his entire life. So if we can't allow Black men to say, hold on, part of me is nervous about this ticket, then we can never get past the fact that they will never support this ticket. Allow people to critique, address it with facts, and then let's move forward. But if we're just shutting people down, then that's not going to work, and it's going to turn people off. But like I said, addressing the shenanigans is a must, but there's also a nuanced conversation about their records that has to be allowed to be addressed. But for we run the risk of being under Donald Trump for 4 more years.
And just to add to that, I mean, Black men and Black women can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can critique our candidates and still not put up with the foolishness. And so when we talk about critiques, they need to be rooted in past political actions and policies and the like. It is Black voters are some of the most savvy voters, if not the most savvy voters in our nation. And so not looking at the 94 crime bill, who signed it, and the impacts of that would not be savvy of Black voters. Not looking at Kamala Harris's record as the attorney general would not be savvy. But we don't need to talk about who she might have been involved with years ago. We don't need to know anything about her having a husband or white husband. We don't need to, care about the fact that, the way she dresses, the fact that she laughs. And we can't, as Black men and women, feed into the negativity that she's going to receive, whether we're negative against her or not. One of the first remarks that Trump went to after her announcement tried to create the narrative of her being an angry Black woman. He went straight to a stereotypical trope to describe her and to set that narrative. That's going to go on between now and whenever she leaves office, and we don't need to add to that. So we need to be clear about what it means to critique and when someone's being plain foolish. And we need to stop people when they're being foolish, and we need to have these nuanced discussions about policy and the leaders who want to represent us.
All right, we got about 12 minutes left, and we got room for a couple more questions. Jermaine, quickly, I want to think about the future. How do we engage Black men, particularly younger Black men, to get engaged in the political process?
Well, this is one of the ways, and I think we had, I think Jazz started talking about this earlier, just the importance of going to your community forums, getting engaged in searching the candidates who are running for office, not just presidential ticket, but those who are running for those who are running for Senate, those who are running for state representative, those who are running for county sheriff, county executive, whatever it may be, county legislature, our city councils, our mayors, getting involved in those processes, making sure that you're registered to vote. I know one of the things that I take great pride in is that personally, I registered to vote at 17 and a half. Now, of course, I couldn't vote until I was 18 in the upcoming election, but you can vote, you can register at 17 and a half. And so we've got to make sure that many of our young people who are out there, if they're looking for internships, if they're looking to get engaged in the political process, that they got to be able to have their voices heard and really find out how to get involved and start doing it. And there's many ways that you can do that, and not just anonymously submitting comments online and thinking that's your political engagement. In a lot of ways, sometimes that's you being a coward because you're anonymously posting crap online, talking about folks one way or the other, but you're not even showing up at the local town hall meeting, voicing your concerns about what could actually change in your actual community. And so we have to start just the pure basics of it and getting involved. I'm gonna flip it over to Jazz wherever he is, because he's ready to go.
Yeah, well, because I run a recording studio, so that's my daughter.
and you run a small baby.
She got loose.
She's ready to vote.
She's ready to go.
So I run a recording studio, so we end up having a lot of these discussions, you know what I mean, while we're working. And two of my main points, because like I said, I go back to the point of belief in the system and how people don't believe in the system. And so one of my points is we need to stop the hemorrhaging. You know what I mean? Right now, the things that Trump is doing, he's causing more and more division. But yes, gotta get the baby. Well, we have to stop.
This is an example that fathers do matter.
Yes, they do.
Fathers do matter. All fathers matter.
Go ahead, Jazz.
But nah, 2 points. We have to stop the hemorrhaging. People, got their little $1,200 check, and now they, man, Trump ain't so bad. I'm like, man, foreign policy is crazy. Y'all got the little stimulus check. $1,200 don't go a long way. Won't even get you through a month. The racial division is so crazy. Like, I don't know if I should thank Trump or not. You know what I mean? Because he brought out a lot of those closet racists, and everybody is being forced to deal with these issues. Like, they're right in your face now. And then combined with COVID, forcing everybody to just pay attention, because at first you were too busy to even pay attention. Now it's right in your face. So he just caused a lot of racial division. And I think that we should stop the hemorrhaging. I know Biden, you know what I'm saying, is like a lot of people were questionable regarding Biden. But I feel, this is my theory, that we have more leverage in the Democratic Party. And I know that's a spicy, statement or whatever, but I feel like we have more leverage in the Democratic Party. So if we can stop the hemorrhaging by getting rid of Trump, and then we can correct the course by bringing Biden in. He's not the most perfect person. There will always be a lesser of two evils at any point. People just think that we're going to have a perfect candidate, and it will never be that way. There will never be a person that just resonates with every issue that you have. So you have to pick. You always have to compromise. And so if we have their ear more so than the other party, let's stop the hemorrhaging and let's correct the course. But we have to have a plan. We have to have a voice. We have to have an agenda. And that's been the issue. It's been a lot of, division amongst ourselves, and we just don't have a solid plan, it seems like, most of the time. So we need to come up with a plan, stop the hemorrhaging, and correct the course. And we'll have 4 years to do it. We can get better candidates in, you know what I mean? But belief in the system. So
Julie, I wanted to throw it back to you on how do we engage Black men, particularly younger ones, to get engaged in the political process, because you have a teenager in your house. And do you sense that your son is a little more engaged in what's going on?
Well, considering his mother is a news nerd, like I'll call and be like, can you record the readout for me tonight? Rachel Maddow's on. So he really has no option. But what I discovered is when he got into debate and he would often do political topics, that kind of drew him in. And he also had a math teacher that spoke about what was going on in the world. So he's very aware of policy. He's even explained some stuff to me. I was like, oh, okay, so you did that with me. So I think he is. And I think part of that is because young people are paying attention, but we have to give them space. They may not know everything. Like, you know, some of them are just now hearing what happened with the crime bill 94. We have to plant the entire history and the landscape of what was going on at that time. And I think taking a moment to listen to our youth, to gently have those conversations with them, to not just get down their throat because they wrong and why are you posting that stupid stuff? No, you have to really engage them. And I think that is going to be so important. And so many young people who are in the streets right now protesting, we need their voices. We need you to not just register to vote, we need you to vote. And some of you, we need for you to run for office, even if it's for a school board. We have to start from the ground up and building this next generation. And our Black men are vital and crucial and necessary and important to do that.
And not only, and as we educate our young people, we need to be practical and realistic about the political agency and advocacy kind of process. We have told people time and time again that you just need to vote. That's all you need to do is vote. And a revolution, like anything, like takes time. It's hard fought. You won't see changes immediately, and your vote is not the only step. It's the first step. When you think about those that came before us, you know, remember our ancestors marching across bridges and fighting and dying for the vote. They didn't stop at the vote. They then continued to be activists, and then they ran for office, and then they, you know, enacted policies. It's a process that goes beyond voting. And when we tell people all you have to do is vote, your vote matters. If you voted, you'd see change. They go vote and they don't see that change. Then it goes back to, then why did I just waste my time? You know, is this really important? Is this the change I want to see? And again, with young people, like with Black men, these campaigns, these candidates, they don't speak to our issues. They don't speak to young people's issues, and then expect them to get out on a cold day and Tuesday in November and stand in line for hours and cast a vote. There are organizations, and only a handful, that do surveying of Black people to figure out what their issues are. And you look at those surveys, the top issues are jobs and education and racism. Our candidates don't speak to that. If you're not talking to me when I'm listening to you on TV about the issues that matter to me, then why do I take my time and invest it in making sure you get elected? And if campaigns won't spend the money to invest to make sure you're talking to my issues, then why would I be invested? If you look at the campaign spend with Black consultants for Black voters as compared to the number of Black votes these candidates and campaigns need, I'd be willing to bet it's at 1%. These campaigns spend millions of dollars, and about 1 to 2% of that spending is on Black voters, although Black voters may make up 6%, 12%, in some areas 30% of the actual vote. So again, some of it is the investment of these campaigns, the organizations. Some of it is what we tell our kids, and it needs to be the message that these candidates push out, and making sure that message aligns with what young voters want.
All right, as we start to wind down, we got a couple more minutes.
Brian, can I say something real quick about engaging Black men, especially the young?
About 30 seconds, quickly.
Give me a little bit more than 30 seconds, because I got to address two. I got to address two lies in the chat that are dangerous. There's some misinformation in the chat.
Take your time, brother, because I saw that too. Go right ahead.
Yeah. Derek Wells, you are absolutely incorrect. Your vote does count. You shouldn't be up here with a panel trying to give so much information to our community. You're acting like a provocateur right now. There are 538 electoral college votes. You're absolutely right. But the Supreme Court demanded that the electoral college has to go with the popular vote of their state. So don't say that people's vote don't matter. First of all, Terry, the CBC is not running for president. So your argument is mute at that point, brother. So don't do that. That's bad. That's bad juju. That's not good, y'all. And then back to talking about engaging Black men. Listen, we are sleeping at the wheel if we believe young Black men are the only voters that don't turn out. Black men of all ages are staying home. So this idea that we have to just focus on young brothers is not that's not the cat's meow. The real deal is we have a serious problem with Black men engagement in political process, and it's because we are absent as it pertains to what's important to us. And until we start centering that, this will always be the case. It's not just the youth. If you look at demographics across the age range, Black men stay home because politics don't give them home.
Mm.
Can I say one thing as well? Because Julie really made this point, and while I'm going to make this reference, Julie, I know you are not a single mother by far, but there's so many single parents out here who are raising children. And when you talked about your son, it really struck a chord with me, is that too oftentimes parents spend time talking at their children and not talking with their children about the issues that really matter the most. We tell people what not to do, but we don't tell them how to do it. And I think that also relates to just this conversation that we're having about politics, is that we oftentimes find ourselves fighting each other back and forth, and no one's listening to each other about the real issues, about how do we really improve our quality of life for every single person. That actually matters. And if we just take the time to pause, take a chill pill, and listen to each other, we can get a lot more resolved. And I think that's also just reflective in parenting. Instead of talking at your children, talk with them about why you shouldn't do such and why you should think about doing it a different way. And in this time of COVID, we realize that there's no real plan and times are so uncertain and things are going to change quickly. But we've got some time to really talk with each other and spend time with each other to make things better.
All right, as we start to wrap up, I wanted to leave the last word for Michelle Watley from Shirley's Kitchen Cabinet. Quite simply, what should be people's voting plan for November the 3rd?
That's a great question. November the 3rd is less than, I think it's 55 days away. It'll be here before you know it. And we need to make sure our voices are heard, not just at the top of the ticket with the presidential vote, but in Missouri, you'll also be voting for a new governor and other statewide elected offices. In Kansas, if you're in Kansas, you'll be voting for senators and House of Representative members for Congress and other local seats. And as we try to discuss in this entire, discussion, make sure we make it plain. The top of the ticket is important, but those seats that are local are just as, if not more important. And so when you're thinking about getting out to vote on Tuesday, November 3rd, you got to think about all of the options that you have to vote, whether it be to vote early and absentee, to vote by mail, or to vote in person on November 3rd. So just some key deadlines to keep in mind. September 22nd is the first day of absentee voting. If you won't be in town, you have ailments that will keep you from getting to the polls on that day or other issues, you can request an absentee ballot, fill it out, get it notarized, and get it back to the election board. October 7th is the last day to register to vote. So if you're not registered to vote and you want to vote in November, you have to get registered by October 7th. The last day to request a ballot by mail, if you want to vote by mail, you won't be in town, you won't be able to go to the polls on election day. That is October 21st. And then of course, November 3rd is the day that absentee ballots have to be received by the election board. That's a lot of information, but you can find this information at your local election board's website, whether it be the Jackson County Election Board or others. All of this information is on that website. You can also make sure you're informed and ready to vote through those websites. You can find a sample ballot. If you want to know who's going to be up for election and who you'll be voting on and what you'll be voting on, the website will have a sample ballot that you can view so that you can do your research beforehand. If you're already voting and you're paying attention, you're probably getting mail and text messages and phone calls from all of the candidates talking about your issues. When we talk about the importance of voting, that's another important reason to vote. As an operative, I know firsthand that if you don't vote on the campaign side, we don't reach out to you. We don't know you exist. And so we go after people who we know vote regularly or regularly enough that we should expend resources to court them for their vote. So that's another way to be informed. Make a plan for election day. If you got to get a babysitter for the kids, You got to work it out with wifey so that y'all can have time to go to the polls. If you got to talk to your boys and see who you can bring with you during the lunch hour to go and vote, do that, but do that before election day and be prepared to perhaps stand in long lines. You may not be able to get in and vote quickly, and that's okay. As long as you're in line before the polls close, you can vote. If you are standing in line at 7 o'clock, you can still vote that day. So those are just a few things to think about.
Hey,
to
Michelle.
prepare to vote on Tuesday.
Michelle, I think one thing also, make sure that your information, your ID is updated.
Yeah.
Because that is very important too, because, you know, they got all type of tricks out here. You know, just when you go to the polls, make sure your information is up to date before you go to vote.
You can check your voter registration before you go to vote. You can at the Jackson County Election Board website or the Secretary of State's website. You can make sure before you go to the polls that your registration is up to date. And if it's not, you can get it fixed beforehand. If you get there, you have issues, you can call 1-866-OUR-VOTE. They have attorneys on standby who will make sure that your vote is counted if you run into any issues at the polls. So there's a lot of resource. We can't take for granted that it's not exactly easy and that we don't make it easy to vote. As Mondale mentioned earlier, in some countries, voting booths are in the grocery stores and you have, 2 months to vote. We don't make it easy to vote, but it's still our duty to do so that we can make our voices heard and so that we can have a say in what goes on politically and exercise our political agency. And again, voting is just the start of that. It's not the end all be all. It's the start to making sure your voice is heard.
Thank you all so much for volunteering your time and coming on and joining us and sharing all of this information. And you can also go to kprs.com to register to vote. The Morning Grind with Shay and Shine, Julie Jones, will have all the things that you need to know covered on our prospective shows. Myron Fierce, Operations Manager of the Carter Broadcast Group, Jazz Brewer, 64111 Studios, Jermaine Reed, former KC Councilman and MCC Board of Trustees, Mondale Robinson, Black Male Voter Project, and of course, our very own Julie Jones from Hot 103 Jamz and Michelle Watley from Shirley's Kitchen Cabinet. Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you. Be blessed. Be safe.
God bless you.
All right.
Nice job.